and a little bit interactive as well. So I'm going to ask all of my panelists to just join me on stage, please, and ask them to do an introduction of themselves, because I think that does them justice a little bit better, especially in the shorter time frame. So can I ask all of my panelists to join me on stage? Thank you. I'm going to also take a seat next to them and just have as I said, a little bit more of a conversation. If we can just move to the sort of edge so that everybody can see everybody. I just don't want to get behind the podium. I'll sit in the middle. That's fine. Yes, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, can we give the panelists a round of applause, please? Thank you. So I want to start off with some brief introductions. I'm going to ask our gentleman to the right to just give a nice introduction of himself and just elaborate a little bit as to why he, wants or is positioned well for this panel.
Sure, thanks, Danie. Morning, everyone. I'm Oliver Johnston, CEO and founder of the Solink Group. So we are a specialized renewable energy consultancy, helping commercial industrial companies in South Africa transition to procuring more renewable energy power. We have three kind of key divisions, one in technical advisory, where we've structured over 180 embedded renewable energy projects. We also play a role in monitoring the performance of operational assets. So we monitor just over 250 large-scale assets across the country. And we also play a role as an intermediary between large-scale suppliers of wheeled power and large users of wheeled energy, structuring just over 500 gigawatt hours of wheeled energy transactions. So.
Thanks so much, Oliver. Jaye, do you want to just do an introduction?
Sure. I'm Jaye Connolly. I'm chairman and CEO of a company called RippleNami. We are a US-based company in California, but we work only in Africa. We work throughout all Africa. We work with the governments. We pull all their big data together for data transparency. So why am I here? I come from the great state of Texas, and I'm from the oil, gas, and mining industry. But data is the new currency, and AI we're going to talk about, because that's what's going to need a lot of power.
Absolutely. And Queen, do you want to just give a brief introduction of yourself as well?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Queen Mokudubete-Manyadu. I am from a company called Fraser Alexander. What we do is tailings management for the mining houses. We've also got a minerals processing division, which means we do a lot of processing of commodities. And then we also do water treatment. Why am I here? Is because within our minerals processing division, we do quite a lot of work in Mpumalanga, which is, as you all know, where most of our coal in South Africa is. So yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. And my name is Danie. I'm the sustainability lead at Moore Infinity, part of the Moore network in the world, the 11th largest auditor in the world. And I'm here to obviously chair this session and just give some insight. So what I want to ask the panelists first, I'm going to open it up to the panel. And it's now 2040. And South Africa has chosen sort of a specific path as to where to go. So paint a picture for me. What is the energy mix? What percentage is coal, renewables, gas, hydrogen? And who's thriving economically? I mean, what had to happen between now and then for your vision to start? And I'm going to start with Oliver. And Oliver, maybe just elaborate as to how you see your 2040 vision.
Okay, yeah, it's obviously a broad-ranging question. I think kind of the key fundamentals for me from a South African perspective would be that in the next 15 years, we've transitioned out of a vertically integrated, state-led monopolistic utility to a more liberalized market, which is kind of underway. It's obviously the introduction of the wholesale electricity market should be kicking off softly on 1st of April next year, but that we've managed that transition effectively, I think that would be the first key movement for me. And this, I guess, from a renewable perspective, obviously where I'm coming from, I think fundamentally what I would like to see is a variable energy supplied grid as opposed to a base load orientated grid. And so the principle of that is that you are basing the predominant supply of power on renewable energy, being the least cost power scenario, and you are then incorporating the correct dispatchable technologies, whether that's gas, BESS or battery energy storage or whatever becomes most cost effective to provide all the other grid support services that are required. Obviously, coal provides a huge amount of important services to the grid, your grid support, your frequency, your voltage, the black start requirements, inertia, spinning reserve, all of those other supporting services. So those, it's very important that those are accounted for and adopted efficiently in a variable or renewable energy driven grid. So that would be my...
Fantastic. I think that's a great answer. And I want to come to you, Jaye. From an American perspective, where do you see South Africa in 2040? Do you think it's a mix? I know the panel is predominantly focused on renewables versus fossil fuels, but maybe it's a more nuanced view as to green versus black.
Well, in 2040, you'll never hear the word load shedding. It'll all be gone. You won't even know what that means in 2040. It will always be 50-50. I hate to break the renewable bubble. Fossil fuels are never going away in our lifetime. What I see in 2040, it's really the infrastructure, because we have a lot of renewables in US. Maybe you heard of Texas. We froze in the winter because the solar and the wind was frozen and there was no power. So people actually died. So we will always have a mix, but it's all about the infrastructure and the grids. And last year I went sailing for 8 hours in the ocean, in the Atlantic Ocean. For 8 hours, there was a wind farm. Now we were sailing, there was wind, there wasn't one turbine moving. And I asked my friend, who's an energy consultant, why aren't these moving? She said, we don't have battery storage. So it really comes down to, we only turn them on when we need energy and then we turn them off. Battery storage, infrastructure, grid, that's what really needs to be secure by 2040. And we will always have a mix of clean coal, fuel, hydrogen, renewables. It's going to be a mix.
And Queen, what are your thoughts? I mean, as I said, it's maybe a more nuanced answer than just green or black. But what do you think as to South Africa's future in terms of 2040?
Yeah. So I like what was said by the previous panel, saying that South Africa has got a great reputation. So 2040, we still have a great or even greater reputation. Coal is still very much part of the mix, albeit operating at a much lesser fraction. I don't think 50, I think maybe more about 10%. Renewables are definitely dominating the energy mix, and I think we've had sort of a successful transition into that. And I think for me, the main thing that I think is happening in 2040 is that in South Africa, we are processing our critical minerals and beneficiating here in the country. So that's something that I would like to see. And also, when it comes to mine rehabilitation, which is something that we're still grappling with as a country right now, it's something that is a large employer of our people. And I obviously have to mention tailings management because that's something that we do. So with regards to that, with tailings management of the waste that comes from the mining operations, it's a high-tech, data-driven industry, which is something that we need. So I think we continue to employ a lot of people. Yeah, so that'll be...
Yeah, and I mean, just to segue into the next question, Jaye, you made a very important point. I mean, South Africa's got 60 gigawatts of renewable projects ready to deploy. But our grid capacity limits the absorption. I mean, we need 14,500 kilometers of transmission lines and a significant storage capacity. So what is the critical path for infrastructure investment and deployment? How do we centralize transmission? How do we distribute the generation and the energy storage? How does that all work together? And what's actually being built and when?
Yeah, this is 2040, or are we talking now?
We're talking now.
We're talking now. Okay, great. So I think it's got to go private. You got to get out of the government hands. Nothing really happens fast or well in a government hands. And I'll tell you what we're doing in the States. Because the AI boom is happening, we have battery plants, we have Elon, we have Nvidia, we have Google. Everyone is just building these giant data centers, and they need power. And rather wait for the government said, we're going to clear all the environmental permitting issues, and you guys build your own power. So you can power your own data centers, because it sucks a lot of power. So I really think it's got to be privatized in corporations' hands who can actually move the needle. If it's under the government, we're going to be sitting here talking like this in 2040 about.
And I think that's an important point, and maybe Oliver, just to you. Of course, as I said, the capacity is there. The deployment and the absorption is the issue. So even from a renewables point of view, do you see, what are your thoughts in terms of the potential for absorption and the limitations around that?
Yeah, I think first to just agree with Jay, I think it's important that we continue to encourage the private market to play a role both in our grid strengthening and our generation rollout, and the grid support services that are going to be required to add more power onto the grid. I think, like, kind of more specifically, I mean, I'm a big advocate of curtailment. So we have a reasonably sizable grid infrastructure, I think probably substantially the largest in Africa. So we need to get more usage out of that grid. So at the moment we are, still, although we're opening up a little bit of curtailment options in the Western Cape and Eastern Cape to allow a bit more wind into the grid, I think there can be a lot more done to get more usage out of our existing infrastructure. So for me, that's the lowest hanging fruit. Can we install some battery energy storage at these key nodes, the MTSs? Can we create sustainable ways where new power being put onto the grid is they're paying a small premium to reduce their production by 5 or 10%? And can those generators also provide their own sort of balancing with battery energy storage? Which I think the answer to all of those is yes. So I think for me, like a really low-hanging fruit is enabling better usage out of our existing grid and getting more projects on the line quicker. Obviously, then your grid strengthening, which we know is going to take some time, needs to be run in parallel.
Yeah, it's a good point. And Queen, maybe just to you on the obviously abundance of employment opportunities in the coal space. A latest survey is sort of 107,000 people depend on coal. So what is the right side? Are those saying coals and economies are dead, or those saying we need coal to baseload reliability for the grid capacity builds?
Yeah. So for me, it's not a binary choice. Economically, coal is under a lot of pressure. We know that there's been a lot of discussions, I think, about, this past mining Indaba, our minister came in and said, King Coal is back, but it's still under a lot of pressure. And the long-term viability is very limited. And then secondly, when we're talking operationally, it remains essential. I think, like you said, we're going to be using fossil fuels for a long time to come. So for me, it's both arguments have a merit. As Fraser Alexander, we work at the coal phase, and we see on a daily basis, both figuratively and what's the other word?
Literally.
Literally. So we see the impact of areas where the mines are closing, what it does to the communities. We see how that affects people. We see the social dependency of communities when there's no longer operations that are there. So I think for me, the right side is the side that prioritizes sequencing properly. So it needs to be a phased approach, and I think we need to do that very responsibly. And we do that by a few things. We need to have the right policies or policy clarity, because I think sometimes we take a long time in making decisions. So I do think that we need to have policy clarity and move fast with it. Also, I think just in terms of, I know that we've got some money that's been put away to extend life of mines in the coal industry. that also needs to be done in a way that is time-bound and that is also efficient. Yeah, I think I wanted to say here, to just quote my CEO, he always says that you can walk and chew gum at the same time. So I think when it comes to this, that's something that, you know, we can phase ourselves into making sure that we responsibly do this.
Maybe throwing this back to you, Oliver. I mean, do we need coal for baseload reliability while the grid builds capacity?
I think the short answer is yes. I think there's a place for coal at the moment. I mean, if we switched off our coal plants now, that it provides 75% of power to the ESCOM grid, we would have no power here. So coal is obviously, it's there, it's important, it's been the bulk of our power supply for the last 50 years. I think we're going to see, in my view, a transition out of that as those aging coal fleet does decommission, that some of that power is going to be replaced by renewable supply. And I think, I mean, point that I didn't get to, for me, fundamentally what we want as a country is the lowest cost production of energy possible. I think most people can agree with that. It's critical for any kind of economic growth, and if we want to be an industrial powerhouse, a home of manufacturing in Africa, that's a key pillar. So I think, what the decisions need to be made around data and least cost. How can we get a stable grid that produces power at the lowest cost? So I think that's the fundamental point for me. So, that we're not making decisions around ideology or other factors, but we're really trying to understand how can we get the lowest cost power out of our network. And then I think just another point, obviously what we have in South Africa is a huge strategic advantage. We've got the Northern Cape, Northwest, some of the best renewable energy resources in the world, with huge tracts of land and quite, as I say, decent grid infrastructure there. So it's a massive strategic advantage that, we need to utilize. So I think, I always like the point on coal, not to kick coal too much, but the kind of saying that, people didn't advance past the Stone Age because we ran out of stone. Like, there's a reason why technology disruption happens, innovation happens, and I think, you need to maximize your advantage on those disruptions, not necessarily, fighting against them is probably not overall going to leave you in a competitive position internationally.
Yeah, and sort of as this energy mix evolves, different regions, different industries, different worker groups will experience different impacts. So how do we ensure this transition creates opportunities broadly? I mean, not just in renewable energy jobs, not just, but across mining remediation, across green hydrogen, critical mineral processing, green manufacturing, other emerging markets. So what does genuine economic diversification look like on the ground in coal-dependent regions right now? Maybe, Jaye, you can shed some insight as to what does that look like from a coal-heavy economy?
So from a coal perspective, so what we did in the States is we made coal cleaner, not clean, but cleaner, while we brought up other technologies and other renewables. So I think that's really where you guys are going to go next. And then as far as jobs, oh my gosh, there's so many jobs. Just because of this AI boom, and I don't know whether it's hitting you guys as hard as it's hitting us. I was just at the UN General Assembly with the Minister of Mines of Africa, and we were talking about the environment, because what do they need for AI? They need rare earth minerals and critical minerals. And they're going to be digging that out of the ground, so the environmentalists don't think about this, but then that destroys the land, right? So that is a cycle that has to be really put a fine point on, especially from an ESG's perspective, when no one's thinking about it. But that creates a lot of jobs. So I do think this new AI revolution, I will tell you, JP Morgan, I was with the head of JP Morgan, I was with the head of Morgan Stanley, I was Goldman Sachs and KKR. Everything they're investing in this next year in 2026 will be infrastructure related for the AI boom. That's it. It's going to increase our power needs by 100% in the US, and we can't handle that right now.
And maybe, Queen, your inputs as to how do you think, and obviously you work in the coal space where remediation of the mining sector and coal specific facing in the tailings is specifically important. Maybe just shed some light on how that also creates jobs, and as Jaye said, how we make coal a little bit cleaner.
Yes. So we currently have a project that we're doing with one of our clients. It's a rehabilitation project. So what's good about that is we're taking an area which tailings had been sitting there for a long time. We're removing it, and that area is being rehabilitated for something else. In fact, it's something I think once we're done, our client will, they'll be bragging quite a lot because it's one of the first. So for us, that's something that we see in future as something that will definitely be providing jobs, but it's something that we're currently doing now. So we're providing jobs right now. Another one is so what I wanted to add with that is what we're also doing is we're creating areas or space for renewables, for where renewables can happen as well. But in the medium term, if we also look at that, is that critical minerals processing is something that's going to be important for us as well. That's also job creation. That's also something that puts South Africa at the center stage, because we know in future, you've just mentioned AI, that needs a lot of what critical minerals that we have in the country. So I see those two areas as, for us, that we're currently making sure that we're creating jobs for people in our country.
And that segues nicely into where I want to go next, which is essentially looking at South Africa's energy mix and even our proposed energy mix going forward. There's a specific infrastructure need, there's an economic opportunity, there's a workforce transition. What are the sector priorities? Maybe I can come to you first, Oliver, from a renewables point of view. What are the sector priorities for the next 3 to 5 years? What positions a renewables consultant like yourself in this space for succeeding in this evolved mix? And what partnerships or support do you think you need from both a private and public sector to try and succeed in that space?
Yeah, I think kind of touching, if I'm answering your question, but sort of touching on the point is that obviously we're looking to see this liberalization of the market, but I think it's also important that, I think completely unconstrained markets have also run into major issues. I think there's been problems in the States with overproduction, in Australia, Germany, where we've seen sort of unconstrained renewables and not the correct market signals, and the participants in the market not being properly incentivized to do certain services, and those have been missed, and there's been problems. So I think it's definitely a relationship between private and public sector. Where's that sweet spot between enabling the right skilled, best, most competent parties to fulfill the different roles, but still having an overarching plan that's coherent and covers all the bases. So I think that's fundamentally important. I think in terms of just kind of coming back to the last point, what we see from the modeling is from a least cost basis is the scenario where you have a bulk of renewable power powering the grid with the right fossil fuel support and dispatchable power will save South Africa in the region of 100 to 200 billion rand a year. So I think that, that's the scenario you want to get to. That obviously that's a direct saving. Then obviously the indirect benefit is, hopefully all the other economic activities that are then built around that low cost power. And I think the just transition is around moving away from complete fossil fuel, where we had 75% power supply, to a much more balanced grid with substantially higher supply of renewables. But I think it's important then that, that transition is done with sort of empathy, with people in mind. And, if you can produce power at a third of the cost and you're saving 100, 200 billion rand a year, I think, certainly some of that money should be ring-fenced to help in terms of skills development, job creation, and helping the immediately impacted people in the transition, sort of mitigating those impacts. So I think that's very important. And I think sort of in the short term, I guess what the market always craves is sort of policy certainty and a bit of clarity in terms of how things are going to look over the next 5 years. That helps investment, helps growth. So I think that's probably the key thing for us we want to see over the next 5 years as we're going into a massive transition. I mean, this wholesale electricity market is a huge movement for our energy sector. It's a difficult task. I think obviously it's easy just to say, okay, we must do renewables and Eskom must deal with it. But I think it's a very difficult task to manage the role that the national transmission company is going to play, distribution, NERSA is going to play. There's a huge amount of work that needs to be done, and I think so it's about working together to make sure that transition happens effectively, and then trying to create as much policy certainty as we can to help drive the growth we need in both generation and the distribution.
So obviously from a first world perspective, there are clear real risks if the transition isn't done thoughtfully. I mean, there's a polarization in the US with regards to sustainability and with regards to green issues. What do you see as the real risks if this transition doesn't happen thoughtfully?
We'll be in the dark, right? We'll be sitting here in the dark. It's a problem right now. So I live in California, and our wonderful governor said no more gas-powered cars, only electric. And every July, we have one hot week where we have to not power the cars. You're like, what are you thinking? They just don't think through. So I think the environmentalists have had fear-mongering for quite some time, and I tell them your marketing is terrible. You got to tone it down a bit and think through the whole ecosystem, which no one has really sat back and said, okay, if we go renewable, where does this stuff come out? It comes out of the ground, it's under the forest, it's ruining the water in Africa. I mean, all I do is drive around Africa. I work all throughout 30 countries, and the communities are suffering the worst. There's no power. You have 600+ million people that don't have power. You have 400 million that don't have clean water. I mean, it comes at a consequence. And I don't think we're really thinking that through. So I always try to keep the communities in mind when we're trying to figure out what the next policy or the next big thing. And one of the things we haven't talked about is nuclear. It's very clean, very scary. I know Russia's out there signing a lot of MOUs, especially in Eastern Africa. We'll see where it goes, but more, even on the AI centers in the States, they're going to use small nuclear reactors. So that'll be interesting to see how the environmentalists handle that.
Yeah, and I think you make a very important point about beneficiation, and maybe to you, Queen, I mean, you probably on a day-to-day basis within the coal space see how these mines are transformed and changed. How is that benefit and the movement and transition to clean energy, how is that going to be passed down to your general consumer? How is that going to be passed on? I mean, Oliver made a very good point. He said there has to be a business case for renewables. So what is the business case for looking at tailing remediation, looking at the transitioning to green energy? What is your take?
So when you were asking her about, what the risk is, in my head I just thought load shedding. But so I think the business case for us is really, and we're already seeing this, by the way, with a lot of illegal mining, that one of the things that you get proper destabilized communities when you're not remediating, when you're not rehabilitating, when you're not, and I think this also came through when we had load shedding, when we had all sorts of challenges with Transnet. This is when we started seeing a lot of our illegal mining going up, and that's affecting the communities. So I think one of the things is, and I'll always go back to this, is unemployment, and that creates a lot more problems for us. So if we do this properly, we provide that employment and we stabilize those communities. I think also, just in terms of, because one of the things that we need to do is we need to increase the grid capacity for us to be able to use our renewables. So if we don't do it properly, again, that's another delay, and it's load shedding because it means energy insecurity. and we don't want to be in that space. Yeah, I think that's what I can think of right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe on that, I mean, coal is at a 4-year low in terms of pricing, right? I mean, but South Africa is now extending investment to 90 billion in these coal plants, these aging and dying coal plants. So what are the economies saying? How do we deal with this? And maybe to Oliver as a first point, how do we deal with this existential threat to coal as a base loading mechanism? And is renewables the correct, or is solar the correct manifestation of proceeds, especially in South Africa, to proceed with in terms of an alternative to that coal and aging coal infrastructure?
Yeah, I think if I'm following you correctly, I think we still need the power. So I think that firstly, in my view, we need power first, and then we want second step is low cost power. So I think we at some stage these plants, these coal plants, many of them are way past their life expectancy, and obviously as an engine gets older, it gets more difficult to maintain and more expensive. And at some point, it needs to switch off. You cannot run these things forever. So we're going to, there has to be a decommissioning of these plants as they go past their life expectancy and as they just become too expensive to operate and maintain. So I think we will see that. I think the IRP does call for the decommissioning of 8 gigawatts of coal by 2030. So I think that will be the first start of that decommissioning. And again, our hope is that it's data driven and cost driven, and but at the same time keeping an understanding of what the grid requires to supply power to the country. Then sort of, I mean, the role of renewables, I think already what we're seeing, I think Eskom noted, I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, the Energy Intensive User Group conference, and I think Eskom's already showing that there's an overproduction of, where there's the most capacity on the grid is actually midday now. So we're seeing, because of the introduction of the amount of solar PV on the grid that there is, we're already starting to see sort of a bit of capacity at midday power. So I think it's already, I would argue it's important that the concept of battery energy storage becomes very important. I think just doing solar by itself with our current grid at super large scale starts to create problems. But fortunately for us, the cost of battery has come down 80% in the last 10 years. And so we've, as South Africa, have sort of timed our run towards renewables maybe better than some of the early movers who didn't have the luxury of a cost-effective battery storage to deal with oversupply of power midday. So I think that the role of PV-based together becomes very critical in starting to replace the coal as it decommissions, obviously supported by wind, and then the importance of other dispatchable technologies.
And maybe just the final round to the whole of the panel. Again, we back to the vision of 2040. We've all provided sort of a mixed balance, but as the topic asks, if we had to give an answer as to green or black, where's your position in terms of, and I mean it's been quite clear throughout the panel that it's a nuanced view, but where's your position in terms of green or black? Is renewables the future of energy, or are we still reliant on fossil fuels to some extent? And again, we think about it 20 odd years from now. What is your view? Maybe I'll start with Queen first.
Okay. So I think I've already stated my position that it's not binary. We can chew gum and walk at the same time. But the transition is already happening. And I think for me, the question is whether we shape it or are we shaped by it? So I think as Fraser Alexander, I must just say that, or rather let me just say that our energy transition, for me, it's not going to be something that we win by just having an ambitions, because we are going to renewables, whether we like it or not. But I think how we move towards that is not going to be won by ambition or just, conversations and talking about it. I think we're going to win it by how our ability to execute, our ability to implement, to do so safely, responsibly, and most importantly, in partnerships. I think we've already had a lot of conversation around strategic partnerships. I do believe that if we have proper partnerships between government, between communities, between the labor, our finances, if those partnerships work very well, then we can do this very well. So for me, the direction is towards renewables.
Oliver, you want to comment maybe perhaps next, and then Jaye to finish us off, and then I'll ask the audience if they have any questions just before we conclude.
Sure, I think I sort of covered really my points there, but yeah, I think for me, it's got to be around least cost. I think we're fortunately in the position in where we are now in the sort of maturation of these technologies that least cost is going to be predominantly or a very heavy percentage of renewable-driven grid. So I think that's where we're going. So I think the key thing is around how do we enable that and how is that controlled? I mean, even if you looked at the latest integrated resource plan, I think some of the challenges you kind of see in that type of documentation that takes 2 years to prepare is that from the time that it started versus the time that it's published, you know, the battery energy storage cost is down 40%, and the gas price, I think, is about doubled due to lack of supply. So those kind of assumptions can throw out that whole sort of 2-year planning exercise like substantially. So it's around. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I think it's very dangerous if the state tries to have too much control. Because the movement of the technology and the disruption of the technologies, I think, is happening at a pace that's too quick for full sort of state control to be done effectively. So it's important that, you know, we do liberalize the market, we do privatize, we give the people, and in South Africa we have the skills, we have the people who can build the generation assets, the distribution assets. So can we create an enabling environment with clear policy that allows that transition to happen effectively? And I think just then to reiterate, you know, can we then utilize some of the benefits we're going to get out of this lowest cost power and the savings associated with that to make it a more just and softer transition for those, you know, directly negatively impacted by it.
Jaye, maybe finally to you. So I think most panelists and myself as well included are in the green camp in the long term.
Solo.
Just maybe a final thought.
Sure. So I'm an accountant by trade back in my days in oil and gas, and you look at the numbers. You have over 600 million people that do not have power today. By 2030, Africa will have the largest workforce in the world. We are too far behind to think that it's not going to be a 60-40, 50-50 split. Renewable, you don't have the financing. Most of these governments have 90% of their budgets are going to finance debt. So there's just not I don't see the numbers behind this to say by 2040, you're going to be mainly renewable. I just don't see there's a catch-up to be done, and it can't be done that quickly.